It's Talk Funny, a podcast by Mark Bailey and comics from all over. We ended up in Japan because our milkshake brings all the boys to the yard, the prison yard. The Talk Funny podcast from Nagoyaradio.com and Nagoyacomedy. Here's Mark Bailey.
And we're back with Talk Funny. I'm Mark Bailey here with Garrett Groesbeck. Thanks for coming back every week. We appreciate it. You know, you have to go through Jingle Girl. You guys got a thing going on. I'm starting to wonder.
I mean, she is very attractive, but it is kind of a challenge to confront her advances. She's very forward recently.
Yeah, she's got an attitude. She's basically, I give her things, she just crumples them up. Give her things to read, and she's just making allegations.
And she throws them at me, actually.
I was never in a park where there were cameras. There were no cameras in that park. And it was a kindergarten, and she's got it all wrong. It was a kindergarten that I used to go to, so it's fine if I hang out there when I'm 50.
Millennium gasp.
So in a previous show, Garrett mentioned the term ALT when he was working. He came here as an ALT, and that stands for Alcoholic Language Teacher. No?
I am a good Mormon woman.
Assistant Language Teacher is what it
Yes,
stands for.
uh-huh.
And I've never done it, but I've heard that it's being compared to like a human tape recorder. Did you experience that?
You know, I was more like a human CD. I was more like a human CD player, really.
Right.
This is the modern age.
Or an MP3 player.
Uh-huh.
Pandora, right? A human Spotify. That's what you were.
Yes, exactly. They pushed the button for what they wanted. I was a human artificial intelligence interface.
So you were just there to basically announce, pronounce the terms. Is that
I find that it's
thought?
Really helpful to think of it as a sort of performance art where I receive money and in return I shout English vocabulary at Japanese children.
Attica. That's an Al Pacino reference. We'll have to put that in the show.
He wants to kill me so bad he can't taste it. I can always go to Attica!
This whole podcast is about comics and how we landed in Japan and what we're doing in Japan and how to actually live your life in Japan and still get actually paid for comedy. And Garrett has done open mic for us a few times, and I was curious, like, for open micers, like comics, as I mentioned before, a lot of us are language and comedy. We're not like, I'm a language nerd, but I'm also a comedy nerd. Most of us are comedy nerds, and that's how we kind of know what's been done before, so we don't steal it from someone. And it gives us ideas on how to do tangents. But for your open mic stuff, it's usually 3 to 5 minutes open mic. And what do you do for material? Like, how do you think of things? And do you like use a memo pad, or do you use? There's several recording apps you can use on your iPhone or your smartphone. What are you doing?
Well, there is a lot of public transportation time here in Japan. And
Right.
What else are you going to do? But I've never recorded myself now that I think of it. That does sound kinky, but I have never pursued that particular path. But I do take notes and sort of think of... Well, and also in the last 2 years, I've had a lot of time. I was in grad school here in Japan, and I worked part-time teaching English, so I had a lot of time on the train to just think about how could I express all of this frustration and stress through words that would make people laugh, as opposed to just going home and throwing myself off a bridge. So
Right. And so do you write it down, or do you talk into a phone, or?
I jot down notes to myself. So anybody out there who's wanting to try stand-up comedy, jot down notes to yourself. But I do also listen to a lot of stand-up comedy podcasts and specials, and Netflix, thankfully, is making, I mean, aside from Orange is the New Black, scintillating though that is, it also gives you a good chance to watch a lot of stand-up comics. And
Yeah, they have some great specials. What have you seen? What do you like on Netflix, some of the specials they've had?
Jen Kirkman, I love Jen Kirkman. Fortune Feimster, I love Fortune Feimster. Big old lesbian.
Yeah.
And
She's hilarious. She doesn't have to say anything. She's just funny looking. She looks
just
like
her use of her face.
She looks like Trailer Park Katie Lang. If Katie Lang ate Canada. She's she's huge, but she's hilarious. And she's funny.
Hilarious. And I actually don't watch that many straight male comics, I realized. Maybe
Right.
that's some discrimination on my part. I probably should watch more straight men. But Kathy Griffin, I love Kathy Griffin.
Right.
There's not that much Kathy Griffin on Netflix, but
Let's see, Dave Chappelle, I like him, and Bill Burr's had some podcast. There's been some specials on Netflix. Bill Burr, Dave Chappelle, a lot of the kind of the later big guys, Louis C.K. You know, I noticed, I have to look this guy's name up. There's one guy I actually don't get. I'm starting to become an old comic, and I didn't get this guy at all. I'm gonna have to look it up. We'll talk about something while I'm looking for this. I just watched his special. He's a young Jewish guy, and it just seemed to me like a meeting with my family. It's just saying, I mean, my family's funnier than this guy, and I don't get it. He was just telling stories, but he was just telling stories. He was kind of saying, like, he was talking about he was telling a story about a documentary that he watched, and he talked about this for like 20 minutes, and it was about it was called the Cannibal Cop. It's a documentary or something that he watched.
Okay.
Cannibal Cop. So he was talking about this, and he basically narrated everything. I mean, our podcast is funnier than his whole show. And at the end, he just said, by the way, so the cop, I watched the whole thing, and he wasn't even a cannibal. That's your punchline after 20 minutes of build-up? And he would talk about, he would say, like, he would do jokes about black people because he looks kind of black, and jokes about Jewish people because he's Jewish, and jokes about Hispanic people because he's Hispanic. I'm like, why not have a sex change, and then just make fun of everyone, because you used to be a guy, and then now you're a girl. I don't know. It was just, I'm watching it. I'm like, who put this guy on? Because I wouldn't put him on open mic. Yeah. This guy, and I think Netflix is desperate. So
did you find his name?
So here's some of the ones I've seen. So Louis C.K. And then his name is Joe Mendes.
Oh, I don't. I'm sorry. I'm not familiar.
He's. I think there's a thing called alt comedy, and that's what millennials like.
I do like what tends to be presented as alt comedy in some ways.
It's kind of, if you like Green Day, and then there's a new, they're alt rock, and then you go to a show, it's like there's a new guy and he loves Green Day, right? There's a new band, they love Green Day, so you go there, and then they do like really bad versions of Green Day songs, and they do like Green Day songs, American Idiot, and they only do 40 seconds of it, and then they stop.
American Idiot without the irony.
Yeah, and they do just a really bad job of Green Day songs. So they're out of tune, then they stop and drink mineral water for 3 minutes. It's performance art.
Yeah.
So I hate to say it, but millennials, you're not able to pull it off yet. You need a little bit more experience. Andy Kaufman, he was good at performance art, and look what happened to him. He died of cancer. So performance art.
Hey.
So Joe Mendes. There's a couple of people. Steve Martin, at the right time you can do performance art. Steve Martin, his whole shtick, it's not funny now, because if you're 20 and you do Steve Martin's act, even though it's different jokes, I still know it's Steve Martin's act. Because Steve Martin was the first to get up, and he had a banjo, and he's like juggling, and he can't juggle, and then he's like, well, I only got 18 minutes left of my show to fill this time, so hey, who has a story? He was just basically defecating on the idea that comedy has a pattern, he hated the fact. By the way, Steve Martin has a crash course on comedy. It's a master class,
and
I'm taking it with some of the comedies. It's a blast. I get to talk to him. I get to with him.
Wow.
It's a blast. For comics, it's a blast. But it's like you think I can't learn something from Steve Martin? Of course I can, right?
But you have to have a little background there, but
yeah. And so Steve Martin, he was bigger than a rock star in 1979. He had a #1 single, King Tut. It was a parody about King Tut touring around the world. It's like King Tut never left Egypt until he died, and then he went around the world and King Tut. And he was a rock star and a comedian. But he would get on, and he said in his autobiography that he didn't like the rule that you have to do: set up, punchline.
Yeah.
Set up, punchline, or premise. Punchline. He said, I'm going to do premise, and then my punchline is BS. my punchline is gone. Nothing.
Steve Martin, I could never imagine such a thing.
And he would do that, and it's like, end with your strongest stuff. Steve Martin said, I end with my weakest stuff. And people just go, well, it must be funny because he ended with it, because he was against all the stereotypes of what a comic should be, right? And so he's a comic genius. Now you get the alt comedy guys thinking that they're Steve Martin, but Steve Martin was funny and he had material.
Yeah.
So this Joe Mendes guy, he just stands up and he tells jokes and he tries to be cute. But he's not gay, so he's not getting the gay guys, and he's not getting the lesbians, and he's not that cute. He's not good looking, so he's not getting the girls, and he's not funny, so he's not getting the comics. I'm like, so here's Joe Mendes' award-winning comedy special, and his whole gag is, he's going to call it that and then run for the award. He's going to nominate himself for the award. And at the end, he doesn't win the award. That's the whole hour punchline, is at the end, his is called Joe Mendes' award-winning comedy episode.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he doesn't win an award. Do you get it?
Joe Mendes.
That's the whole joke.
And you're really shocked me.
And you're thinking, who's Joe Mendes? And every comic is thinking, who's Joe Mendes?
I'm not familiar. I don't know of this.
So he's
right. I don't actually need a famous person to be there. Endless episode of Nets, right? And at any point we're gonna be on a date, like somewhere fancy, like Chipotle, right?
I don't know. I can't pull any one-liners out of him because he doesn't have any jokes in his own special. I just don't. Am I just old? I don't get it.
No, I don't think so. I do like some sort of performance art style younger comedians, but
well, you have to have even your punchline. If you do performance art, like what's his name, Andy Kaufman. So he would do this on Saturday Night Live. It takes a lot of. This is a clean show. It takes a lot of
chutzpah.
Yeah, chutzpah. That's a good one. It takes a lot of male genital, orb-shaped male genitals. To do this live on Saturday Night Live, where you may see this, you can see this on YouTube. Mm-hmm. People are expecting a stand-up routine from Andy Kaufman, and what he gets on is he plays a record player on stage, plays vinyl, and it's the theme for Mighty Mouse. Mighty Mouse will sing "Here I Come to Save the Day." Now, this is funny to comics because that's how Jerry Lewis in the 40s broke in. He basically terrorized Dean Martin's set. Dean Martin would be like, "Everybody loves somebody sometime." Very romantic, and you got the mob guys in the audience with their girlfriends, and then Jerry Lewis comes on and is like, "Hey, do you want some pizza? You want some pizza?" And he spills it on Dean Martin, and we talked about this in an earlier show, but Jerry Lewis was basically the first alt comic, and so his first act is he would play Enrico Caruso, which was a famous opera singer. He was the Bruce Springsteen of his day in the early 1920s, and by the 1940s he was just a legend. Jerry Lewis did very physical comedy. He would play an Enrico Caruso song, and then he would just do it like a effeminate lady boy. In the 40s, this is very, very edgy in the 40s. And then he'd go, "Yeah, I like girls, I like ladies," and he's got this very gay, effeminate accent. And he was, to my knowledge, he was never gay, but he knew it was funny to talk like that. He'd go, and he's in a skit, and he's in a movie, and they said, "Why do you want to be in the army?" And he goes, "Because I want to impress the ladies." That's the first. When I saw him, I was like 5, and I saw him in a movie. So I'm like, "This guy's the funniest guy." And my dad was like, "Do not imitate him. You're gonna get beaten up." But anyway, so this Mendes guy is not. He's Jewish. That's the only thing he's got going for him. But he's not funny. He looks Hispanic, and he says he's Jewish. But it's like, we'll take your Jew card away because you're not very funny. So I'm turning the screen here. So anyway, that's a D recommendation. Is not every special on Netflix is funny.
Indeed.
But the younger comics that I watch, the less impressed I am. I mean, it's probably just the old.
Is there anybody that you do like?
Oh, I mean, the ones I named, like Dave Chappelle. That's the thing. Is like the people my age.
Yeah.
Louis C.K. is kind of my age. Well, Anthony Jeselnik has got to be 12 years younger than me. At least 15, maybe 12, 15. And then there's some. I think my point is, you can be young and funny and have a Netflix special, and I recognize comedy. It's a language. I recognize. This guy doesn't have it. This guy doesn't have it. And I think the Netflix people are like, just put him on. Just put him on. We just need more comedy. But it's like, if you do that.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to increase their comedy reservoir.
Well, you mentioned Jen Kirkman. She's definitely younger than me.
Yeah.
And she's funny. And, Tig Notaro.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God. Her deadpan, she's just so good. She's like a lesbian Bob Newhart. I don't know if you know Bob Newhart, but if you look up Bob Newhart from the 60s, you go, that's a straight cisgen male version of Katie Lang. Katie Lang and Tig Notaro.
Life.
Tig Notaro, did I tell you? Tig Notaro, you know Katie Lang.
Yeah.
She's also a lesbian icon.
Course. Yeah.
Okay, so I met Katie Lang many times in New York. Yeah, I interviewed. I was a DJ, and I had to interview people. Yeah, and she's very funny. And so one day, I actually did this on stage in my gay, and I didn't know Tig Notaro. I didn't know about her.
Yeah.
So I turn on the YouTube, and I see who I think is Katie Lang.
Yeah.
On stage, and she's hilarious. What happened to Katie Lang? And she's talking about.
She finally broke into comedy.
She's amazing. She looked just like to me, to a non-lesbian. She looks just like her.
No, to a fellow non-lesbian, I can understand that.
She looks a lot. And plus, I hadn't seen Katie Lang in 15 years. Looks like an older.
Real skinny.
Yeah, and then Katie Lang. Tig Notaro is talking about how she has cancer. I'm like, oh God, Katie Lang has cancer. Oh my God. This is horrible. And I'm asking all my old friends from New York, my old DJ buddies, did you know Katie Lang? I'm spreading a rumor. Did you know that Katie Lang has cancer? What? I just saw it on YouTube. And so one of my old partner, he's like, show me